Hello, hello. No, I don't hear it. Good evening and welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for January 5th, 2023. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. The commissioners who are present for this evening meeting are at City Hall and on Zoom. We also have staff from the city attorney and clerk's offices, as well as city planning department. If you're joining us on Zoom this evening, we can see that you are here. You may observe the meeting. However, your ability to be seen and on screen and talk will be muted. During the public testimony portion of the meeting, you will be unmuted and then be able to comment. Please note that we cannot take questions until the public testimony portion. If you have a process question during the meeting, please email cityclerk@meridiancity.org. They will reply as quickly as possible. With that, we'll begin with roll call. Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Stoddard. Here. Commissioner Grace.
Here.
Commissioner Lorcher.
Here.
Commissioner Seal.
Here.
Absent are Commissioner Wheeler and Yearsley.
Thank you very much. So the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. We have no modifications, so can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Unopposed, motion carries. Next item on the is the consent agenda, and we have 3 items on the consent agenda. The first is to approve the minutes of the December 15th, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We also have findings of fact, conclusions of law for file number H 2022-0076 Key Bank Meridian Branch and file number H 2022-0081 for Guthrie's drive-through. Can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. This time, I would like to briefly explain the public hearing process. We will open each item individually and begin with the staff report. Staff will report their findings on how each item adheres to the comprehensive plan and unified development code. After staff has made their presentation, the applicant will come forward to present their case and respond to staff comments. They will have 15 minutes to do so. After the applicant is finished, we will open the floor to public testimony. Each person will be called on only once during the public testimony portion. Clerk will call the names individually of those who have signed up on our website in advance to testify. You'll then be unmuted in Zoom, or you can come to the microphones and chambers. Please state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to address the commission. If you have previously sent pictures or a presentation for the meeting, it will be displayed on the screen, and the clerk will run the presentation, or you can run it by yourself. You have established that you are speaking on behalf of a larger group like an HOA, where others from that group will allow you to speak on their behalf. You will have up to 10 minutes. After all those who have signed in and up in advance have spoken, we will invite any others who may wish to testify. If you wish to speak on the topic, you may come forward in chambers, or if on Zoom, press the raise hand button in the Zoom app. If you are listening on a phone, please press *9 and wait for your name to be called. If you're listening on multiple devices, such as a computer and a phone, please be sure to mute those extra devices so we do not experience feedback. We can hear you clearly. When you're finished, if the commission does not have questions for you, you will return to your seat in chambers or be muted on Zoom and no longer have the ability to speak. And please remember, we will not call on you a second time. After all testimony has been heard, the applicant will be given another 10 minutes to come back and respond. When the applicant is finished responding to questions and concerns, we will close the public hearing and the commissioners will have the opportunity to discuss and hopefully be able to make final decisions or recommendations to City Council as needed. At this time, I would like to continue file number H 2022-0077 for Dutch Bros, Ustick, and Eagle, and we will begin with staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Happy New Year to all of you. Glad to be back here. I'm excited about all the community members in attendance tonight as well. It looks like it's going to be a pretty quiet evening tonight. So you get stuck with me tonight. I'm covering both Sonia and Stacy's projects as they're out enjoying a vacation and just getting a much needed evening for Sonia. So she was at City Council. It was a long hearing, so told her I'd take Cigar Canyon for her as well. So first item on your agenda, this was continued from the December 15th hearing because of a noticing issue. And so it's back before you. That discrepancy has been corrected. And so the applications before you this evening is a conditional use permit and a development agreement modification. As you all know, the because there is an associated development agreement modification with this conditional use permit, you are a recommending body on the conditional use permit tonight. So you will be making a recommendation to council to accompany that DA modification. So this application is contingent upon council approving the development agreement modification. The site consists of 1.2 acres of land currently zoned CG in the city, and it's located at the southwest corner of North Eagle Road and East Ustick Road. Let you know, the applicant was in front of council about 6 months ago on a DA modification, and that one was denied. And so that's what's predicated this new DA mod and then also this conditional use permit. That was one of the recommendations from city council, is they had a hard time justifying approving a concept plan with a drive-through on it without having the associated CUP to go along with it to see if it actually works on the site. And that's why you see both of them concurrent tonight. I think the commission is very familiar with this corner as well. There's been quite a few development applications on it recently. So the applicant is here tonight to talk about a restaurant with an associated drive-through. So with the Dutch Brothers, which is that coffee kiosk there. It's 1,100 square feet. You can see here it's right at the intersection of the roadway here. Access is provided from a private street that is currently constructed. Cross access was also provided to the property to the south. Currently, this is the only access, well, except for the access out to Eagle that is provided from the public street. This is the primary access into this development. As you know, there are specific use standards that go along with drive-through uses. Staff has analyzed those in conformance with the submitted application. We find that the site does conform to the drive-through standards as stated in the UDC. I know some of the concerns that we hear with drive-throughs is where those escape lanes fall. And in this particular case, because this drive-through is over 100 feet, they are required to provide that escape lane. But if you notice here, the escape lane is really at the same point as you exit out of the drive-through. Now, the code doesn't speak to where that escape lane should land. So in our it's part of our recommendation, we've analyzed it. We feel like it could still function, and we still have recommended approval of this application. So applicant did provide a landscape plan associated with this development. During our pre-applications meetings with the applicant, we wanted to make sure, because this is a prominent corner, that if we did have a drive-through with a substantial amount of asphalt, we wanted to make sure that additional landscaping or berming was done along the street to minimize the impacts of cars stacking as they waited to get their coffee order. So the plan here, you can see there's some additional landscaping that is showing. We've also conditioned applicant to provide an additional screening and landscaping as well as part of what you see here in this landscape plan. So they need to do a little bit more, and staff will look at that with the certificate of zoning compliance and the design review application that will follow after the proceedings tonight, or after city council acts on the application. So here are the proposed elevations. Again, these will be required to comply with the city's design standards. Pretty typical elevations to their new prototype. If you've had a chance to go by the Costco site, you probably see the same model or the same building elevations up there as well. So I had a chance to look at the public record before the hearing tonight, did not see any written testimony on the subject application. Again, staff is recommending approval with the conditions in the staff report. And with that, I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Bill. This time, would the applicant like to come forward? Good evening, sir. Please state your name and address for the record, and the floor is all yours.
Yes, Nick Wecker, and senior planner with Barghouse Consultant Engineers. We're the civil engineering consultant for Dutch Bros, and address 18215 72nd Avenue South, Kent, Washington. And like I said, I'm here as a senior planner with Barghausen, representing Dutch Bros this evening, and this application to walk you through our proposal and the changes that have been made since in the last 6 months since the last hearing. And so like Bill outlined, this is the corner that we're looking at, Ustick and Eagle Road. Previously, the proposal that was denied was one of the concerns from the commission was that there was going to be 3 drive-throughs on the site. We've eliminated one of those drive-throughs at the north west corner. That's just going to be a standalone multi-tenant retail building, 4,700 square feet, no drive-through proposed. Of course, the Jamba Juice was approved previously, that drive-through, and that's been constructed, as well as the American Family Care Building D at the south east corner. That's been constructed as well. And so part of our proposal here tonight is to seek approval for a conditional use permit in addition to the DA modification for allowing a additional drive-through at the north east corner, which would be a 1,100 square foot Dutch Bros Coffee. We'd have 500 linear feet of queuing through two drive-through lanes. Be similar model to what we see today at 10 Mile and Shinden, the Costco location, which is their new prototype in comparison to like the Linder location, some of the other ones that have the drive-through, one on each side of the building. This would have one single window in 2 lanes. It allows for additional queuing. It also allows for more efficient operations for the runner, which is the employee that works outside the Dutch Bros building and will actually go from vehicle to vehicle with a handheld device to take orders from each customer. That places the order in the kitchen, and then that allows the order to be made quicker so that cars are going in and out of the queue faster. So as a result of that, it minimizes the amount of queuing that is needed. It minimizes the potential for spillover. And so that's kind of what that's the new prototype. That's the purpose of it. And that's the similar model that we're proposed here as well. It'll still have the runner system where there's 3 to 4 employees outside taking orders from each customer as they enter the lane. We'll also have 14 dedicated parking spaces in front of the Dutch Bros for employees and customer walk-ups, because there's a walk-up window on the north side of the building with a patio space that will have some seating and a walk-up pedestrian walkway from U-Stick. Here's the original concept site plan for the development agreement prepared by Kimley Horn originally. This is the other second half of the property to the south that shows a regional commercial center. Recently, understanding that there's an apartment that was approved at this location, which will substantially reduce the traffic considerations for this corner, I think by approximately half is what the traffic consultant estimates as a result of replacing the previously proposed regional commercial center. So we're including that in here as well as that's kind of the second half of the master development that's going on here at this corner. And then this shows the original concept development agreement for our northwest corner that shows the pads. Of course, like I mentioned, pad 4 and pad 3 is constructed. Pad 1 and pad 2 is what's being proposed for modification tonight. Pad 2 would become Dutch Bros. Pad 1 would be the 4,700 square foot multi-tenant retail with no drive-through. Our detailed site plan here. This site plan here shows the patio space a little bit more clearly and more detailed than the first rendering in here. It shows a fairly large patio space that's going to be oriented to the street corner. It'll be set back a little ways, but it'll also have access to the right of way and a short screen wall or hedge that, like Bill said, will work with staff to design those details. And that's also the side where the customer walk-up window is. So customers or pedestrians will be able to enter that walk-up area without having to cross the drive-through lanes if they're coming from the right of way. This site plan also shows 26 vehicles within the queue. Here's a comparison exhibit with the other locations in Meridian. We understand there was concern previously with how Dutch Bros is going to handle potential spillover, kind of in relation to what these sites have experienced over the years. Some of these sites are much tighter in terms of their queuing lanes that are provided. A lot of these examples are also show queuing right off of the right of way too. And so this exhibit here is meant to show kind of a visual comparison of the length of queuing that's provided at these existing locations under the older model where there's one drive-through on each side of the building. So we have the Overland location that had 155 or has 155 linear feet of queuing. That's compared to over 500 feet for the proposed new Dutch Bros that we're reviewing tonight. The Fairview location, 138 feet, and Linder, 218. You can also see the driveways in proximity to the queuing entrances for these sites that has created concern and spillover. And so our site plan that we're presenting today is purpose is to show that that's going to be alleviated, not a concern. And here's our location. Like I said, we're at 524 linear feet of queuing, which is multiple of anywhere from 2 to 5 times what is existing at some of the older prototype locations in Meridian. It's also the queuing entrance is well off of the primary driveway to the center. Thanks for showing that, Bill, over to the west. And so even if there's spillover, it's not onto the right of way. Also, like I said, there's gonna be 26 cars that could fit in this queue. That's the next closest, other than Shinden and 10 Mile, the next closest for the existing locations is 11. So we're going from 11 to 26 in this new model, which is also similar to the 10 Mile and Shinden location, which we have not observed any queuing, major queuing impacts there. I should also mention the escape lane as well. We'll have an escape lane that's striped on here. That also allows customers to exit before they even get to the window. So when the employee takes the order from the vehicle, sometimes the car that's third in line might only have one drink, and the cars in front might have like 4 or 5 drinks to be ordered in the kitchen. And so it's a lot quicker to get that third car, fourth car in line, their drink order. That vehicle would be able to exit the escape lane without having to wait for the window. So that's just another example of how Dutch Bros is able to get cars in and out at a faster rate. Their goal is 30 to 45 seconds, no longer for a vehicle to sit at that window. And they're able to minimize the amount of cars in the queue because cars behind are able to exit via the escape lane without having to go to the window. So not every customer has to get to the window to receive their order. That same model is used at 10 Mile and Shinden as well. And is there any questions?
Have any questions for the applicant? Go right ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Nick, so for the folks that park and want to walk up or use the patio, will they be crossing the vehicle lanes?
Yes, the people that park and want to go to the walk-up window, we have 2 striped walkways that they can utilize. The primary one is going to be, the one highlighted there that's more direct to the patio space. And then they'll be able to access the walk-up window that way. And then there's a large awning over that walk-up window as well to delineate that space.
That's probably not much different than some of the existing locations in Meridian.
In Meridian?
Yeah.
I'm trying, it's no, it's not much different. This building's more oriented to the right of way than some locations, but the older locations have the drive-through lane on each side of the building. So you're going to cross the lane either regardless of where the parking is located, just because you have drive aisles on each side.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant or staff? No. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up to testify?
No, we do not.
Just do a quick. Is there anybody online that would like to testify? Please raise your hand, or if you're in chambers, you can raise your hand and come up. Seeing that we have none, is there, if there's anything else you'd like to add? Otherwise, we'll probably close the public testimony portion of it and move on here.
No, nothing more to add. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. With that, can I get a motion to close the public hearing for file number H 2022-0077? Been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for file number H 2022-0077. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, would like to go first. And I'll throw in, the only 2 cents that I have is hopefully put in a bike rack. That's only because I ride by this and love to park my bike there, so.
Mr. Chair,
Right ahead.
Dutch Brothers continues to, build out in our community, and it seems like they continue to improve on their design. Having 2 lanes simultaneously as opposed to 1 on either side. They've probably done their homework to see that that could be better fit for their customers. And I like the fact that they've really doubled or even tripled the lanes that they've had with some of their other locations.
Agreed. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was just saying, I agree. Oh, I think it's smooth flow. It's nice.
Okay,
Our motion? or-
I'll take a motion at any time.
Mr. Chairman, after considering all staff applicant and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to the city council of file number H 2022-0077 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of January 5th, 2023.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item number H 2022-0077 with no modifications. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. And with that, we will continue item number H 2022-0027 for Sagara. And we'll begin with staff report.
Chair, members of the commission. Next item is also a continued item from the December 1st Planning and Zoning Commission. I won't go into all of the details of this project because it has been continued. If you recall, I think 2 of the major sticking points for the commission was regarding qualified open space and parking were the 2 items I recall that came up quite a bit at that hearing. And so you had instructed the applicant to go back to the drawing board, meet with staff and come back with resolution to do those 2 items. So I'm happy to report that those items have been resolved and the applicant's open space and parking standards do comply with UDC standards. So there are no exceptions being requested to the parking standards or the open space as originally thought in the initial staff report. Also mentioned to you that Sonia updated the staff report to reflect that as well. So everything should be in line for tonight's proceedings. If you'd like, I'm happy to go to the open space exhibit so you can look at that revised exhibit here real quick. See if I can read it here. I believe that was the open space exhibit. This was explaining when it's coming online and what was counted. It's hard to see at this scale, but looking at Sonia's notes here, it looks like there's actually 3.43 acres of qualified open space. Also mentioned to the commission that one of the items that we brought up during the previous staff report was that linear open space along the south and east boundary. Happy to report that the irrigation district has given the applicant their approval to amend their license agreement and actually install the landscaping and required trees per city code. So that does allow the applicant to go in there and basically enhance that and integrate that better with the development without having to lose land area and still provide that landscaping that the city code requires. And I think that's probably what really got us over the hurdle, is just understanding how that was going to work and whether or not the irrigation district would allow the plantings. And then I know we had talked about this, and this was discussed at the last hearing, was parking, and particularly parking, on-street parking, particularly in the curved areas. And the applicant has stated, looking at the parking calcs based on the revisions, it looks like they're still in 16 spaces in excess of what code requires. And then this exhibit shows 122 on-street parking spaces. But again, if this body wants the applicant to not allow parking on some of those curved areas, I'm sure that number would go down. But again, they're in excess of UDC standards, and really the on-street parking is the bonus here. It's just in addition to what the code requires. Had a chance to look at the public record. Didn't really see any new testimony or anything to add that wasn't already discussed at the last hearing. Again, concerns with density and just development in general. I do recall at the last hearing too, some of the neighbors had concerns about the fencing that was damaged during the tiling of the ditch along the south and east boundary. I know we had preliminary discussions with the applicant. I don't think we've come to a resolution on that. So if that's something the body wants to have a discussion with the applicant on, I'd recommend that you do that this evening as well. Again, staff is recommending approval, and I'll stand for any additional questions you may have.
Great. Thank you very much. The applicant like to come forward? Good evening.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tony Sang, 6518 North Fairborn, sorry, North Fairborn Avenue, Meridian, Idaho. As Bill loads that, I just want to note that he's covered most of the things. Also, I'll make the presentation pretty quick and simple. We've been working really closely with the neighborhoods and some of the neighborhood representatives. So to address parking first, I met with Sally, and she's not the official representative, but I think she's kind of leading the charge, and a lot of the neighbors kind of listen to what she's saying. So we've been working together on solutions about the fence. I think the fence is a big issue for them. Sally and I have come up with a couple of possible solutions of how we should fix that fence. Us as the developers are committed to participating and paying for half, if not more, of the fence. And her and I are working together to do a survey of everybody on the call and to figure out what certain people want. That certain people's fences are fine, certain people's aren't. So she's come up with some great ideas of what we can and need to do to get the fencing issue solved. So I'm actively working with her, and she's been actually really pleasant to work with. And so that's part of the process right now. So I'll make this pretty quick. I think Bill has addressed most of the issues. So what I did was highlight some of the issues that was spoken of and kind of made so this is what I first put up, is just the addendum to the license agreement with the Northern Slough, allowing us to go ahead and use that and plant the trees, columnar oaks. So they've already signed and recorded this document. So we have the right to, the new landscaping plan will show the columnar oaks being planted, and they've approved that type of tree. It's a more non-invasive root system, and they're okay with that type of landscaping. The next thing is the open space. As Bill has, and I'll breeze through this since Bill has kind of explained it. A lot of the issues that with open space was doing the right calculations. And if you look at the calculations we have, the next page is going to take a while to load. It's kind of a big file. But what I did was I highlighted each section, and each phase will stand alone and qualify with it above the 15% open space. Together, we're above 20. And one thing I want to point out that is in some of the exhibits there's a 2-acre park that's directly adjacent to the development that we're not counting. It's across the street. It's part of the overall Orchard Park development that we plan on improving. The original idea from the neighbors was a dog park, and then some neighbors decided they didn't like a dog park. So Sally and I just discussed it, that we do a survey of the neighbors and see what they want. I mean, I prefer a dog park, but if the neighbors don't want a dog park, we'll do a regular park. But that's the second thing that I've been working with Sally about, is how we approach that park itself. It's 2 acres. We have control of it. It's not part of the cigar development, but it's part of the Overture Park development, which we're all involved in. And so we're working directly with the neighborhood to make sure that whatever gets put in there is something that everyone enjoys. Let's see if this will load now. Still not loading. But, and also there's a couple of parcels there that there's this extra remnant parcel that we originally included in our open space that we're no longer including in our calculations. We don't need it. So without all the staff recommendations, we're still about 20, a little over 20%, I believe. And if you, of course, if you add the park, we're well in excess of probably 30-some%. And the parking, we just clarified the parking. I color coded it if it's in your packet to show each parking requirement for each building type. And then you'll see what's required and what we're providing. And I think we're about 16 spaces in excess of what we're required. I can stand for any questions.
Thank you. I'll start off. First question was just in the S curve. Still looks like that's going to be allowed parking.
Yeah, and so that's not in our control. That's an ACHD decision.
It's still ACHG.
Yeah, and I've actually actively reached out to ACHD. General Counsel's name is Steve Price. I'm trying to set up a meeting with him. We have excess parking. And if the neighbors don't want it, we don't need it. I can see not having parking there being beneficial to everyone. So we're happy to work with the neighbors, work with ACHD. If they want to put up no parking signs, we're happy to work with them. So we're happy. So I've already reached out to Steve and to try to set up a meeting, talk about putting up no parking, making it a no parking section.
Okay. And then question on the fencing. Generally speaking, when you're going to have a common area that's open to anybody, pathways and things like that, generally speaking, you put in visibility fence. Is that something that you and Sally have discussed?
Yeah, so the fence is actually on the Paramount property. So I think it's subject to their HOA standards.
Okay.
And so that was a big issue because their HOA allows for non-visibility fencing. Our fencing on our south side of our property will be visibility fencing. So we're going to work with their HOA. And, you know, I think most of the neighbors, we've talked to a lot of neighbors, prefer privacy fencing. They want as much privacy as possible so the backyards aren't staring at each other. So I think we might be subject to what the HOA requires on their fence, because it's going to be still on their property. It's either fixing, the idea with Sally that we had was, if we're not going to replace the fence, we'll at least fix them.
Okay.
Put new posts in, straighten them up. And we selfishly want our side of the fence to look nice. They're going to be new homes. So we at the very least want to paint or resurface the fences.
Okay.
Of course, with their permission, because it's still their fence.
Right. Bill, is there any, I guess if this were new build and it was along that pathway, it would be visibility fencing. So just from a staff perspective, can you give any guidance on what they may want to consider? Some, long-term, short-term?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, it really comes down to, it's an existing fence. If you do repairs, it can stay. We're not going to make them tear down the entire fence and put up open vision fence. But as you mentioned, if someone was to want to replace the fence, or they were to tear it all down, then yes, we'd be having a different conversation because code, or we'd be going through an alternative compliance process to allow it to remain as is. Certainly the city doesn't want to get involved between HOA and CCNRs. We'll let that stand, but just the fact that the applicant's willing to repair those sections, I think there's really is no violation there. It's an existing fence that has been there that predates this development. So I don't really see that being an issue at this point.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Anybody else want to jump in? Oh, I thought I saw people grabbing for microphones here. So.
Thank you.
I was going to say we can make this kind of quick here. I don't know if there's anybody in chambers wants to testify. You can raise your hand. No? Anybody online? I see Sally's on there. You want to testify? Just raise your
Yes,
hand.
There is someone online
Okay.
and she signed up. It is Sally Reynolds. You are now allowed to speak. Sally Reynolds. Go ahead and unmute yourself, please. Sally, are you there?
Not seeing her little microphone icon in there, so.
She's got hit the allow.
Okay,
There
can you
she
hear
is.
me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I apologize. It's my first time doing it on Zoom. I wanted to save you guys from my cold germs and not come into chambers. So I'll be testifying from home tonight. But good evening, commissioners. My name is Sally Reynolds, 1166 West Bacall Street in Meridian, Idaho. And yeah, I just like to start off and say I really appreciate the open dialogue that we've had with this developer. It's been great to meet with Tony. I, for one, am super excited about getting this area developed. It's going to mean a whole lot less of dust in my house. And as a dog owner, I welcome a dog park in North Meridian. I think it's a great amenity to have near a multifamily site. The revised parking exhibit looks good to me, and we appreciate their willingness to work with ACHD on the no parking, especially just the curvatures, mainly Arliss, Bergman, and Direct, or those direct roads that feed into it. Yeah, really excited that there are trees being able to be planted on the irrigation that will provide a lot of privacy for all the residents who are there. And so I shouldn't say I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone. I'm pleased with those developments. And now Tony and I get along great. And I just want to preface that, but we do have one difference of opinion. And so I do still maintain that this application is more consistent with an MHDR designation than the MDR designation. And I do believe that the use of the planned development in the city's code was not intended for this purpose. It was intended to allow for greater creativity, not to cram more units onto a plat. So while the neighborhood may have some decent exterior elevations, and they've done a really nice job of making it look great, the amount of units and zero setback lines will really detract from the overall aesthetic, especially in areas where you have 3-story buildings butted right up against the road easement. And you can get a feel of how crowded that will look from their submitted concept elevation. And I had submitted that to city clerk, but it's all right if they can't pull it up. But that concept elevation shows a 2-story, when in actuality, all along Orchard Park, it'll be 3-story. So the application takes the R8 designation and really pushes it to its limit. The gross density is 8.35, but the net density is over 16 units per acre. So we're kind of talking R15 there. Now, as a side note, I was on the city's open space committee for over a year, and we worked with city developers to rewrite city code on open space. And I get it's difficult to legislate minimum requirements while still allowing for flexibility. So that's why we have variances and alternative compliance and PUDs, right? Because land is different, every plat's different. But this is not the intent of the PUD. I mean, what good is a city code when these items can be used for loopholes? So per the development agreement, this area should be at minimum R6, which is around 100 units. And that's what the 2 preliminary plats had shown, somewhere between 96 and 110. So 146 is 50% more. And I believe that if the reduced number of units were on there, the open space requirements could have been met without that irrigation, spot being needed. And they wouldn't need to have the setback requirements. So if this does go for approval to city council, if you're recommending that, the only 2 conditions we would ask was the fence, which, as Tony said, we've already kind of worked on that, but to just put it on the record. And then also lighting on the easement, which Tony and I have also discussed that, and they said they're willing to do that, but to put that on the record as well, that would be great. And I'll stand for any questions.
And Sally, what was the second one that you were said there? I didn't quite hear that.
Oh, that's fine. The lighting, some lighting on the easement that's between Paramount and the back of their subdivision. It's about 35 feet wide, and there's going to be a walkway. It's kind of a long corridor, and so a little bit concerned that that could become a corridor for criminal activity. So some sort of lighting back there. And again, it's just like the fence and just like the dog park. Not everybody's going to agree on everything, right? Like, I don't know if it's low lights or highlights, but just something back there that would reduce the opportunity for criminal activity would be very welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lorcher, go ahead.
on the original day that this was presented on December 1st, I was absent that day, but I did read all the testimony, so I feel like I am mostly up to speed on it. But I did have a question for the applicant in regard to the fencing and the drainage ditch.
Okay, we'll bring them back up here in a minute, but unless there's anybody else that wants to testify. Nobody else is online, nobody else in chambers. So if the applicant would like to come back up.
Tony, you mentioned that there's a drainage ditch that was tiled, and is that on your property? Or is on Paramount's property?
That is on our property.
And so were you as a developer responsible for tiling it in?
Yes, it was not part of the cigar development. It was part of the overall Orchard Park development that we tiled it previously.
Okay. And so is Paramount suggesting that because of the tiling, that's how the fence got damaged and they feel like it should be your responsibility to fix? Is that how the conversation started?
I think that's how that conversation started. And regardless, we were okay with, we want it fixed, you know, just from our development's view to the back fence. I've been out there and the fence is 20 years old. I think, Sally can probably correct me, but anywhere from 15 to 20 years old. So the fence is getting a little old. It's looking a little tired.
Is it vinyl or cedar?
It's wood. I think it's cedar.
All right, that's all I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
And if you want to address any of the other items that Sally brought up or anything along those lines.
Sure. If you look, Bill, do you still have that exhibit if loaded completely? Because I have a exhibit for those 0 lot lines, and the 0 lot lines isn't so we can cram a bunch of buildings right on the lot line. You know, I have an exhibit where it shows the points where we actually go to 0 lot line. Here we go. So is this yours or is this? Do you have the 0 lot line exhibit that we submitted? Because if not, it's on the back of mine. Yeah. And yes, there's 0 lot lines, but it's not, the intent wasn't to push everything to the edge. And once once you see the exhibit, it's for articulating the buildings, create a little more, just so they're not straight buildings. They articulate, so the corners of the buildings have 0 lot lines, and there's probably, give or take, and once we pull up the graphic, 7 to 10 points where the lot lines, and it's right here. Put up. Last exhibit here. I think it's still trying to look. It's a big pop. So you can see the little red marks, and that's where the 0 lot lines exist. And so just to clarify, it's not to create a 0 lot line everywhere so we can cram the buildings to the edge. It's, you can see how the buildings are articulated. And we hate to lose the design function because of these points, but if we really have to, I guess we can go redesign it and straighten the buildings out a little bit more. We just thought it was a good architectural feature to make it so that it doesn't look like rows and rows of buildings.
Anybody else have questions? The applicant? No? Very much. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing for item number H 2022-0027?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for file number H 2022-0027. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No opposed, so motion carries. Would like to go first?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to put it back on the record. On December 1st, I recused myself from this matter.
Okay,
I live in Paramount and I'm a member of the HOA. Consistent with that myself. this time.
okay, appreciate that, sir. It's just the three amigos.
Mr. Chair,
Go right ahead.
after reading all the testimony and going through the presentation from the December 1st meeting, I feel like, except for the questions that I asked today, a pretty good understanding of what's kind of happening here, and that this was always intended to be a mixed use area at this particular junction. I think the developer has worked very hard and being very accommodating to not only to the area, but to their neighbors to make sure that as many people can be happy with it as they can. And there's always going to be somebody who's going to complain, and adding more houses to any of the subdivisions we have is always going to be a complaint, but we are still in a growth community, and these types of products are things that people are looking for to live in these areas. So I support their design.
And it's good to see something that was fairly hotly contested, come back in and have good support from the community and good input from the community as well. So that's very nice to see. I'm glad that the pathway worked out. You were able to put in what needed to be put in there. So sometimes that's a pretty tough sell, but it looks pretty good. I mean, hopefully something can be done with ACHD to eliminate parking on at least half of that S curve. Appreciate you working with ACHD and approaching them proactively. That's going to make things a little bit easier as things go forward. So, and I mean, it'll just make it safer. I mean, it's only going to take, one person kind of trying to race car through there to make really bad days for others, for sure. So, but yeah, I like the pathway. The lighting is, I think, probably a really good element to this. So, especially if the fences are going to be built where they're not privacy fences, it would be good to have some extra light shining back in there to make sure that's, a safe place for people to bike through. That's about all I have.
Well, I agree with all that. I also like the purpose of the zero lot line. I like the idea of having the buildings not just a solid line. It's great. And I like the design as well.
Real quick, I do have a question for Bill. And essentially when it comes to some of the things that have been mentioned, the lighting, essentially working on the fence or repairing the fence, replacing some of the fence, and this, they're over 16 spaces on parking. They're going to talk to HCHD. Is that something we can condition? I don't want to make sure that we are putting that in the public record, but not in such a way that we are telling them you have to eliminate 16 parking spots. You have, I don't want anything along those lines, but I do want something in the public record about that.
Sure. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, certainly you can condition the project and simply staff can just say as proposed by the applicant. Because again, that's what they agreed to do. They agreed to lighting, they agreed to working with the HOA, and they agreed working with ACHD. So in your motion, in your recommendation, if you state that you're adding those three conditions as proposed by the applicant, then when we add it to a condition of approval, we'll say work with ACHD on no parking signs along whatever streets those are, those curved areas as proposed. And then if allowed or something to that effect. So if ACHD says no, then obviously they can't meet that condition. But as long as it's may or shall, or not thou shall, but just maybe leave it open that work with the HOA on fence repairs or those types of things. I think that gives them some flexibility and it's not so rigid in case things don't work out.
Okay, appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with all that 100%. And just to add one more layer of information, I think with Bill, if you disagree, definitely correct me, but I think I agree with everything Bill just said. I think with respect to the lighting in the open space area, you could condition that as a requirement, not as a you will use good faith. I think that one you can make a requirement. The other two, the parking issue, that's really within ACHD's purview. So the best we can say is you're directed to go work with ACHD, but we can't require it because there's no way to enforce that. Likewise, the fencing is on private property and it's off-site. So same thing, we can ask the applicant to work with the neighbors, but we can't require something. I think the lighting is different. The lighting we could require if you if you and the council were so inclined.
Appreciate that feedback. Sorry to cut you off before making a motion, because I don't want to stand in the way of that, but I did want to make sure that we covered that well.
Kurt, does this go in front of city council? So the lighting issue would be really decided by them, correct?
It would, although my suggestion to the commission would be if you feel that ought to be a condition, I would recommend that you include that as part of your motion and recommendation to the council, so the council's aware of your feelings on that. So, but ultimately, the city council would, for lack of a better term, would impose such a condition, but you would be making a recommendation.
Ready if you are.
Okay, I'll give it a go.
Great.
After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to city council of file number H 2022-0027 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of January 5th, 2023, with the following modifications. To continue to work with ACHD on parking in curved areas, working with adjacent neighbors to repairing the fence that is common between both properties, and a recommendation to city council that additional lighting be provided for safety.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item number H 2022-0027 with the aforementioned modifications. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So there's none opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. I'll try to quit looking directly at you like you're going to say something directly after you've recused yourself. So I realize I'm doing that and I'm like, no, he's not going to speak. All right. Let's go ahead and open file number H 2022-0080 and we'll begin with the staff report. One more time.
Let's finish strong. There, members of the commission. Next item on the agenda is the TM Creek Apartments Phase 4. Application before you is a conditional use permit. Reviewing the hearing outline here. During the hearing, it looks like we failed to let you know that you are making a decision on this tonight. You are approving the CUP or recommending or approving, denying, or continuing this project this evening. So it does not move forward to city council. So apologize for that error, but just wanted to bring that to your attention. So this particular property, the site consists of 2.63 acres of land. It's currently zone CG, and it's located on the south of West Franklin Road and east of South 10 Mile Road. You can see here in the three graphics before you that the site is actually larger than 2 acres, but staff anticipates the applicant subdividing this property in the future and providing approximately a 7.41 acre site in which 2.63 acres will be the multifamily portion of the development. And I'll explain that a little bit more as we get into it, as we get to the site plan. But as you're aware, this is part of the TM Center PUD that was approved back in 2020. And this particular site that is governed by its own design guidelines. And so the plan that's before you tonight is consistent with the concept plan that was tied to that development agreement back in 2020. So as I mentioned to you, the subdividing portion here, so I'll grab the cursor here real quickly. You can see here on the site plan and landscape plan. So essentially, when they subdivide, the property is going to be approximately, again, over 7 acres in size. Mentioned to the commission that staff has highlighted the area in red that is subject to the CUP approval on the right. Everything else that is around the red outline area has already been approved at staff level because those are vertically integrated projects, residential projects. So those do not require a conditional use permit in the CG zone. They're principally permitted. So in working with the applicant, we broke this project really up into 2 phases. Phase 1, again, was the staff level approval to get all the parking, the associated parking, and those 2 structures under construction. And then they were going to come back and then do the CUP to finish out the open space and the 2 additional buildings and the clubhouse and the amenities associated with the overall 7-acre development. So that's really where we're at today. So that's why you see a site plan larger than what you're really reviewing as part of the CUP approval, if that makes sense. So the CUP itself, again, is 2 buildings, 4 stories in height, and it's it is actually 64 units. And it's a mix of studio, 1, 2, and 3, 4 bedroom units ranging in size from 656 square feet upwards to 1,443 square feet at a gross density of 28.6 dwelling units to the acre. Again, which is consistent to what was required as part of their development. You can see here that there's a public street here along the east boundary that is providing an access point to this particular property, and then also connecting into phase 3, which is directly to the west of this project. So there will be interconnectivity not only with this phase, but also existing phases that are currently under construction. If you had a chance, I know you reviewed the staff report, staff had questioned the open space. The question wasn't whether or not there was adequate open space. The question was whether or not what was the accurate number to reflect to this body, because we didn't want to give you the impression that this site has 65% open space. That when you look at it, when you look at just a 2.43 acre site, it has 65% open space because there is no parking associated with the acreage. It's really, you take out the building square foot and everything else is open space. So it makes sense. But looking at this in conjunction with the vertically integrated project, if we were to look at the entire 7-acre site, there's approximately 32% open space overall between these developments. And if I'm not mistaken, this development will be sharing amenities with the vertically integrated portion as well. So the one thing that I do appreciate working with the applicant on these projects is that each one of their multifamily projects are standalone. They have their own open space, own amenities to go along with the density that they're proposing on their sites. As I also mentioned to you, again, similar architecture out as what's currently under construction or constructed in the area. Of course, a lot of these do have their own identity as well. So there's always a mix of materials. As I mentioned to you, because of they have their own design guidelines, the applicant actually provides us a letter from their design review board verifying that the design's been approved. And then that way, all that city staff has to do is review it for conformance with UDC standards. So it's been actually a pretty good partnership with the applicant doing that process. It's actually the first time we've done it with somebody in the city, and it's been working out pretty well. They handle the design review and we just make sure they comply with code. So makes it easy. Had a chance to look at the public record, did not see any public testimony on this. We did receive written testimony from the applicant and they're in agreement with the conditions of approval. With that, I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. The applicant like to come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
For the record, my name is John Wardle with Brighton. My address is 2929 West Navigator, Meridian, Idaho, 83642. I did raise my hand here so that I could present. So maybe, I think, Bill, you'll have to undo yours. You'll have to. Oh, thank you. Let's see here. Can I be raised to a? It's perfect. All right. Make sure you see that on your screen. Perfect. I will say at the very beginning that we are in agreement with all the staff conditions. We don't have anything to modify on the conditions that are before you. I do have just a couple of points. I want to just, as Bill has mentioned, that we have 2 projects here that are really one project, but the way that they were have been reviewed, they're one project together, but 2 different applications. From a context perspective, this represents the location of the TM Creek Apartments Phase 4. We currently have Wayfinder built, which is east of 10 Mile. We also have just finished construction of Benchmark Road down to 10 Mile Creek. Over the winter, we were going to be building another bridge crossing. And then next summer, we will complete Benchmark and Cobalt. So we will have a complete collector system at the 10 Mile project so that everything connects to Franklin and over to 10 Mile Road. We have currently built an access drive aisle paralleling Franklin, and we will continue that on this project. As it shows right here, there will be a parallel roadway connecting over to Benchmark and to Wayfinder. We will have a right-in, right-out access eventually onto Franklin Road here in the center point, but the full access points will be at Benchmark and on Wayfinder, and those will both be signalized in the future. Benchmark is currently signalized. We've actually paid for all the signal for Wayfinder, and that's in ACHG's court to install that, but we anticipate this next year. In 2023, we'll have 2 signals operational there. Overall, 10 Mile Crossing is 300 acres. This site, specifically the CUP in front of you, is 2.36 acres, and it's highlighted here in red. But the whole project, 10 Mile Creek Apartments Phase 4, is a total of 7 acres. And this is showing the entire project together. Just a couple of illustrations here. This would be looking south as if we're kind of standing over or flying above Franklin Road, looking south towards the interstate. Building C, the clubhouse, and Building B. We also have Building A and Building D, which were previously approved as vertically integrated. Another view of that as well, of the different type of buildings that are here. The CUP application in front of you tonight, it is 2.36 acres. There is on this specific site 1.51 acres of qualified open space, which is 65%. And as Bill mentioned, that seems high in the overall project. We actually have 32% open space. The amenities that we are providing that all of the uses here will have as a clubhouse, which is 11,000 square feet. That's conditioned space inside. We'll have fitness, gathering spaces, workspaces where people can actually get out of their apartments if they want to and have some dedicated workspaces like we see in some of the executive spaces. We will have a standalone pool house, which is shown here off to the south and to the east, which is 1,000 square feet. There's some outdoor spaces there as well. Up above on the second floor, there's a second floor sun deck. Around the pool, there's pool and spa. We have 2 pickleball courts. There's seating and fire pits. And we also are building an 8-foot parallel sidewalk. The regional pathway is on the south side of 10 Mile Creek. And we've built that with 1 phase already, and we'll continue that along. But on the north side, we have installed or will install with phase 3, which we're doing an 8-foot sidewalk right now, and we will continue that along. It doesn't replace the regional pathway, which we are committed to building. It just provides another way for residents to move east to west along this corridor and provides more connectivity throughout. Again, the amenities are for the entire project. The area highlighted in red is the CUP. The area highlighted in blue or banded in blue is the vertically integrated space. This gives you kind of an overview of the overall open space for the project at 32.5% or 2.41 acres of the 7.41. I do want to note that there is the 10 Mile Creek corridor, which will have the regional pathway. That's not included in this calculation. That is a separate open space. When we bring in the plat, which will be TM Creek Phase 7, it will include that. But we are not loading up this project with that open space of the creek and the regional pathway. We previously submitted for vertically integrated and provided the city with all of the parking in one package so they could see it, even though the CUP had not been provided. The required parking is 267 spaces. We have an overall 300 parking spaces. We would only be required 52 covered spaces, but 212 of the spaces here are covered. So a lot of the parking in the site is included, and we do exceed the parking requirements. We more than exceed the parking requirements for the projects here. Just a couple more pictures. This would be looking from the south, from the region, the future regional pathway to the buildings. We actually wanted to not just turn our back to the creek. If you haven't had an opportunity to walk it already, the parts that we have built on the south side, it is highly amenitized. Sometimes the drains in the city, we just kind of like turn our back to them. We've taken the approach of that's kind of a front yard. And so these buildings, which are right up along the creek, have full advantage of that. And that's what we've done here as well. We have brought the amenity down to the sidewalk and to the creek and brought these two buildings down as well. Pickleball, as we know, is a popular activity, and we are providing 2 pickleball courts with this project as well. Just an aerial view looking down at the site, the pool area, clubhouse area. Just some elevations there of the buildings. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, we do concur with the staff report and recommendation for approval, and we are requesting tonight your approval of the conditional use permit for TM Creek Apartments number 4, file H-2022-0088. And I stand for any questions that you might have.
Do you have any questions for the applicant or staff? None? I don't think there's nobody left online, and I'm pretty sure you're part of the show. So if there are no questions, nothing further to add.
I
All
don't.
right. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
You.
Can I get a motion to close the public hearing for file number H-2022-0080?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for file number H-2022-0080. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. With that, I'll take comments, motions.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lorcher, go ahead.
since this is part of a bigger project, although I have to say, when I first read it, I was like, wow, look at all the open space for this one building. 64 units, they get their own pole. But it's part of the larger project, and multifamily fits in with the entire design of that particular corridor between 10 Mile and Linder and Franklin. And, you know, Brighton continues to offer, you know, extra amenities to be able to make it a livable and workspace, as well as a nice way to enter into our city.
Mr. Chairman, I agree. I think it's nice fit. Good news.
And comment I'll make is after being in the area and driving through some of it and everything, seeing some of it early on, how it was going to work in that area, I'm actually very surprised about how walkable it is, walkable, rideable. And like you said, making that kind of, instead of turning your back to it, I like the way that you put that, that you're making that more of a front yard. So I like that approach. I like everything that was done there. I wish we could see a lot more of that. You know, not just in multifamily, but, you know, in just some of our basic residential, just improving those pathways and connectivity. So this one's, and like the rest of the multifamily in the areas, it's exactly the same, only different. So, and I like the differences that are in there. It does make each one of these feel like their own little area while combining the whole thing into, you know, into one big workable, livable area. So I have no real concerns with it. Seems to fit into the whole thing. I mean, maybe why not 66% open space, but you know. So, anything, Commissioner Stoddard?
I like it. I like the design and nothing negative to say. I like it.
Would you like to take a stab at a motion on this?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I will. I
Oh,
think if
and-
I read,
Yep, real quick, and just remember this is CUP, so we are approve or deny on it.
yeah, I was just gonna say, I think I read Bill's instructions correctly, that we're not recommending, but we're approving. After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H-2022-0080 as presented in the staff report, hearing date.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve file number H 2022-0080 with no modifications. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No opposed, the motion carries. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Real quick, I think we're going to, Caleb said we're going to try to do, instead of doing training, we were going to try and put something on the agenda at the end of it next time. So I just want to
I'm
make sure.
happy to provide some context on that if you'd
Okay.
like. So Chair, Commissioners, staff is in the middle of looking at our staff report template. And we've actually gone in front of, we've talked with some of our staff members. We've gone in front of City Council and provided them with a survey, trying to get feedback as to what they want included in a staff report and whether or not what we're providing to you in a staff report is relevant or not. And so as part of that effort, because you guys are part of the team and you look at all of our staff reports too, Caleb and I wanted to extend the same invite to all of you and potentially come back on the 19th at the end of the agenda and share a portion of that staff report and get your feedback as we move forward on an update to that template. So I know we have quite a bit on that agenda, so we wanted to make sure that we had one, good attendance from all of you and you guys were interested in it, but two, if you felt like 19th wouldn't work, then we were also not opposed to coming back sometime in February as well. So I guess I'll just leave it up to the commission as to whether or not that works or not, and add something to the agenda if it does.
Personally, I'm okay with it. I think we'll probably still follow the unwritten rule of try not to open anything after 11 because I'll get a little punchy. But if it'll fit into the agenda, then I think, kind of the more information at this point, the better. But anybody else have feelings on that?
I have no conflicts. I will not be available.
And that might be, we'll probably want to chime in with maybe Joy, if you could do that, kind of see what the other missing commissioners feel about that. Again, we want to have good attendance for it. So if we're going to have issues with that, where a few people are going to be
Yes.
gone, which happens,
I
then
can
that's okay.
Definitely look into that. And also just for your information, we have 5 public hearings on the 19th, and only 1 on the 2nd of February.
That date works well too, as long as it works for. I'll be on flight on the 2nd.
Well, maybe just, a quick email to the commission and just, we can weigh in on that and, we'll get you the information as soon as we can, so we can get that scheduled for sure. Are we on what is our time on that? Because we do have to get it. I mean, we have to put it on the agenda at some point in time in order for it to be on the agenda, correct? So what's our timing on that? Plenty of time, okay. Want to make sure there wasn't some time constraint on that. Okay. I will take one more motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lorcher, go ahead.
I have a motion, we adjourn.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We are adjourned.
I said 8:30, boy. I'm so glad.